Hello, welcome everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Before we get started, if you would for us, please type into the chat and let us know where you're calling in from. Hello, hello, hello. All right, we've got Alabama, Germany, Poland, Arkansas, Lithuania is on the call. Oh my goodness, Italy, Virginia, Puerto Rico. There's so many people I can't keep count. Connecticut, Hawaii, Virginia, Alabama, Virginia Beach, Eglin, South Carolina, Mississippi, the UK, Maryland, North Carolina, New York, New York. More from Italy. I think Virginia's got the most people. Spain. It feels so good to welcome all of you from around the world to meet the presentations. Wiesbaden, Germany, Key West.
Welcome, everybody. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for typing into the chat. Kathy, it looks like we have welcomed a really great number of folks to the call. So we're going to go ahead and jump in.
We're going to get started. Thank you for letting us know where you're calling in from. We have now closed the chat feature. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Meet the Presentation, a webinar hosted by the MFLAC training team to introduce you to some of the new presentations in our recently updated OSD presentation library. It's nice to meet you. I am Kathy Hadley Wilson, your MFLAC training specialist, and I will be featuring the first part of this webinar. I have a few announcements to share as we begin this webinar, which is a little different from Zoom meetings. In webinars, participants cannot share audio or video. If you cannot hear the presenter, please double-click your device settings. Please hold your questions until the end of the presentation so you don't miss out on the important information being discussed. To share questions, you will be able to use the Q&A feature towards the end of the webinar. We will answer your questions at that time. A recording of this webinar will be available on the MFLAC website after today's live session. Along with myself, Christy Gardner, our Director of Learning and Development, and Teresa Boehner, our MFLAC Training Manager. Together, we are facilitating today's webinar. This is your MFLAC training team. Christy is calling in from Washington, D.C., and Teresa is calling in from Hawaii. Always remember that we are here for you to support your training needs. This slide shows our agenda for this 1-hour webinar. We will begin with a review of how to access the new OSD presentation library, including accessing resources and videos from the new presentations. Then we'll jump into meeting our first presentation entitled Helping Children Thrive During Deployment Cycles. After that, Teresa will join us to introduce you to our second presentation called Money Matters. We'll wrap up this webinar with a brief discussion on tips for preparing to facilitate presentations at your assignment site, and a reminder of the resources available for sharpening your public speaking skills. We aim to have a small amount of time at the end of our webinar for live questions and answers, but remember that your regional supervisor is the best source of information when it comes to specific questions related to your unique assignment. There are 35 new presentations created in 2022 and early 2023 by our team of trainers, our MFLAC counselors who are our subject matter experts, our SMEs, our instructional designers, and our technical writers. These presentations are replacing our soon-to-be archived presentation collection. Our old presentations are still available on the website until our government customer instructs us to remove them. Here are some of the topics that are included in our new presentation lineup. We've got military life experiences, family life education, psychoeducation, relationships and communication, and healthy habits. This is just to name a few. We are going to take a moment to review how to access the presentation in the new OSD library, presentation library. You will find the OSD presentation on the MFLAC website. After logging into MagellanMFLAC.org with your Magellan username and password, you will click on Briefings and Presentations on the upper right menu bar. From the drop-down menu, you'll click on OSD presentations. Once you get to the OSD presentation page, you will click the blue button, which now provides one-click access to the new OSD presentation library for all Magellan federal employee MFLAC counselors. Subcontractors will double-check with their employer for access instructions. Beneath the blue button, you will find a list that MFLAC counselors can use as tools to identify which presentations may best meet the needs of service members and their families at their assignment site. One list provides brief summaries of each presentation in the library. Another list provides a list of all handouts and shareable activities in the library, including which presentation folder where they are located. In addition, a facilitator guide access point is included so that any MFLAC counselor can access the facilitator guide at any time. Remember that the facilitator guides are excellent tools which may be used by the MFLAC counselor to facilitate a presentation using discussions and interactive approaches. Even if a PowerPoint cannot be shared at your assignment site, the facilitator guide is gold. At the bottom of the page, you'll find the MFLAC training team's recorded instruction webinar for accessing the OSD presentation library and answers to some frequently asked questions. A new feature with the OSD presentation library is now available. Once you click the blue button on the previous slide to access the library, you can now click on a video link on the left side of the page to view a complete quick access point for all videos included in the presentation library. Remember that videos are versatile tools which MFLAC counselors can use to enhance any MFLAC interaction, whether it's a presentation, a consulting session, or even a counseling session. Facilitator guides of presentations include suggestions, discussion questions to facilitate learning and reflection after sharing videos. Several of the videos that we will meet today may be utilized inside or outside of a presentation settings. So feel free to scroll through the video listing to view all the videos available. The first presentation we'll meet is entitled Helping Children Thrive During Deployment Cycles. It is a child-focused presentation, but stay tuned because even if you support an adult-focused assignment site, some of the videos and activities in this presentation may benefit your MFLAC support of adult at your assignment site. As we consider the current events and potential deployments of service members to respond, this presentation may be an important tool for many of our MFLAC counselors to share at their assignment site. In this presentation, the MFLAC counselor will facilitate a learning experience to lead an audience to understand the emotional cycles of deployment, learn strategies to help children thrive through deployment cycles, learn key tips for parents and caregivers to support children during deployment cycles, apply a range of strategies to build a child resilience, engage in resilience building activities for children. Part of this presentation can be shared with a group of children. Others can be shared with a group of adults, and activities and videos can be utilized in any number of MFLAC interactions during a counseling or consulting session. Let's briefly review how to access the presentation files in the new OSD presentation library. First, you will locate Helping Children Thrive During Deployment Cycles, which is listed alphabetically. On the page that appears next, you'll see a handouts folder and a presentation folder. And click presentations to see the PowerPoint presentation, including the compressed PowerPoint file, which may be used for emailing if needed. Also included in each presentation folder is the PDF facilitator guide and the PDF copy of the PowerPoints. After an interactive icebreaker activity, the presentation jumps into defining the different stages of the emotional cycle of a deployment on slides 4 and 5. These slides are exceptionally helpful as they provide visual and graphic presentations of the ongoing cycle experience of military families preparing for, in the middle of, or reintegrating after deployment. Each stage of deployment is identified. Please refer to the facilitator guide for this presentation for a suggested script, which may be helpful as you share this information at your assignment site. Another key idea to share, these 2 slides may be very helpful to share during a counseling session or even a consulting session to help provide a visual guide to represent psychoeducation that MFLAC counselors provide about the emotional cycle of deployment and common experiences of service members and families during each stage. On the previous slide, we mentioned the importance of the facilitator guide. It's true. The facilitator guide for each presentation provides versatile, flexible guidance for sharing information from the presentation to meet the needs at your assignment site. Here's an example of this. Here on page 14 of the facilitator guide, you will see a narrative of quick suggestions to help the MFLAC counselor identify best ways to provide this information with different age groups of children, especially related to slides 4 and 5 we saw on the previous screen. On page 14 of the facilitator guide, we find developmentally sound ideas for applying this content to younger children and older children and even teenagers. These type of suggestions are present in the facilitator guides for each presentation in the library and are just one of the reasons why the facilitator guides are arguably the most important resource in the new presentation library. On slide 8, we see a video specifically created with parents, teachers, or CDC staff in mind. Any person who provides supervision or care for military-connected children during the deployment of one or both of their parents. This video would be great to share with a group of parents at an assignment site or a group of teacher or staff members. In addition, it may also be helpful to share during a counseling session with the non-deployed parent to help identify frequently observed reactions of children during the deployment of a parent and best recommendations for parental responses. It may be helpful to share during a counseling session with a service member who is a parent preparing to deploy. This will help the parent to understand the common reactions that children have when their parents deploy. It's important to remember that even though this presentation is marked as a child-focused video, videos, activities, and guidance within the presentation can also support adults. Remember to go over the facilitator guide of this presentation for discussion questions to reflect on the video and facilitate continued learning from the concepts provided. There's another great video on slide 13 in this presentation. This video demonstrates a short mindfulness activity for children. This video could be shared with a group of children in a presentation or with an individual child or group of children during a counseling session. Because the mindfulness activity is not solely focused on the deployment of the parent, this resource can be leveraged to support any number of situations. Remember that this video can also be found in the video section of the OSD presentation library so that you can access the video independent of the PowerPoint presentation. Before we discuss the handouts available for this presentation, let's review how to access the handout files for this particular presentation. First, you will locate the Helping Children Thrive During Deployment Cycles folder alphabetically. On the page that appears next, you will see a handouts folder and a presentation folder. Click the handouts to see all the available handouts that correspond with this presentation. As we can see here, there are many different handouts available for this particular presentation. This presentation is particularly helpful because it includes multiple different interactive activities written specifically to support children of deployed service members. MFLACs may choose to facilitate this activity with a group, facilitate these activities during a counseling session with a child, or share these handouts with parents during a counseling session as suggested take-home activities to promote parent-child communication. These handouts include a wishing tree activity, which helps the child express well wishes and love for their parents who are away, a paper hug, which can be sent to the deployed parent as an expression of care and connection, and a game using a bouncing ball to share feelings to help children verbalize and identify different feelings. Now, I'll hand the mic over to Teresa, who will walk through more details about Care4 documentation of this presentation.
Thanks so much, Kathy. As we move over to this slide here, before we jump into Care4, I want to review real quick how we can use this presentation as an MFLAC tool. If you were able to join us live or view the recording of the introductory webinar about this new OSD presentation library, you might remember that we described handouts and activities as the sprinkles that can be added to complement any form of MFLAC support. As the same is true here of these handouts, activities, videos, and slides in this particular presentation we're looking through right now. Not only can this presentation be shared as an outreach and engagement activity in front of an audience, But parts of this presentation can also be shared, as Kathy's already mentioned, in consulting sessions while you provide professional advice or guidance about supporting children whose parent or parents are deployed. And additionally, videos and handouts can also be shared, of course, during a counseling session with an eligible parent or child. Now, on the next slide, we'll look at Care 4 for a moment. As we know, careful and accurate documentation in Care 4 is an important MFLAG counselor responsibility. It's how MFLAG counselors tell the story of how they're supporting service members and families at their assignment site. When sharing this material, this presentation, as part of an outreach and engagement activity, a presentation before an audience, be sure to document this situation as such, as an outreach and engagement activity, then select presentation. Document the number of audience participants actively engaged in the presentation. Then, when the question asks, what type of presentation did you provide? Answer with either parenting or deployment. So our recommendation is that parenting should be selected when this presentation or parts of this presentation are shared with a group of parents. Deployment should be selected when this presentation or parts of the presentation are shared with a group of children or CDC, school, or center staff. At the bottom of the screen, we'll see a reminder that presentation materials can also be utilized in consulting sessions. When using any part of a presentation in a consulting session, an idea from the facilitator guide, a handout or activity, or even a slide from the PowerPoint, please answer yes to the question. When you're documenting this consulting session, was a presentation part of this consulting session? Then, depending on the group of focus of the consulting session, describe the type of presentation as either parenting or deployment. Please note, the Care 4 documentation of interactions depends on many different variables and may differ slightly from the recommendations shared here. Please consult with your regional supervisor if specific dynamics at your assignment may result, you believe, in documenting this presentation differently. Before we introduce you to the second presentation we will meet today, we'd like to share with the group that there are multiple presentations in the new library that can be utilized by MFLAG counselors to address concerns related to military deployment. These presentations are on the screen, and they include resilience during uncertainty, military life challenges, staying connected through change, thriving during transitions, and dealing with crisis and disaster. Now remember that a list of all presentations, including brief summaries mentioned on this slide, are available for the MFLAG counselor to reference anytime on the OSD presentation page of the MagellanMFLAG.org website. Let's continue forward, however, and meet our second presentation of the day. We know that financial concerns may be on the minds of the military families that you support at your MFLAG assignment site. We'd next like to introduce you to a presentation that addresses financial concerns while staying within the scope of the MFLAG program. And this particular presentation is called, as you see here, Money Matters. Financial concerns are a strong source of stress for most adults, many adults, even outside the military community, right? In addition, we know that financial disagreements are a common source of stress in relationships. In this particular presentation, Money Matters, the MFLAG counselor will facilitate a learning discussion to discuss how financial values can differ from person to person, even within a family. Identify best practices for communicating about financial goals, discuss how to create those financial goals, and explore resources available to support military families in money management. This is, we will note, an adult-focused presentation, and the content of this presentation is not intended for child-focused groups. Now here, before we jump into what's inside the presentation, let's briefly review how to access the handout files and presentation files in the new OSD presentation library for this particular presentation. First, we'll locate the Money Matters folder, which is listed alphabetically. On the page that appears next, you'll see a Handouts folder and a Presentations folder. Click the Handouts folder to see all the available handouts and activities that correspond with this presentation. And then click Presentations if you'd like to access the PowerPoint presentation, including the compressed PowerPoint file, which may be used for emailing if needed. Also included in this folder, in each presentations folder, are the PDF facilitator guide, that gold facilitator guide that Kathy was mentioning earlier, and a PDF copy, I should say, of the PowerPoint file. Now, the Money Matters presentation begins with an interactive icebreaker discussion, as many of our presentations do. Great way to get the conversation started, and quickly moves into an interactive activity on slide 5 to define values, especially values related to personal finances. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see a screenshot of slide 5. And now on the right side, you'll see an excerpt of the facilitator guide's instructions on facilitating this particular activity. For the activity related to the slide, the MFLAG counselor introduces the concept of values as the beliefs or ideas that we find important. Then the MFLAG counselor asks the learning audience to break up into groups of 3 to 5 people and write down the group's answers to the following questions. And these questions include thoughtful approaches to starting this conversation, like, what 3 things do you most enjoy buying? And how much money do you need in the bank if you were to retire right now? This is a great example of how the facilitator guide for each presentation directly connects with the PowerPoint slide content. Keep in mind that this activity or any activity in the facilitator guide may be shared with an assignment site by the MFLAG counselor, even if the PowerPoint presentation is not used. In addition, remember that activities, as we talked about in the Q&A session, activities can be shared as standalone activities and do not require that they're shared as part of the greater presentation all at one time. Excuse me. As we continue exploring this presentation, we arrive here on slide 7, shown on the left-hand side of the screen, which defines check-in conversations about money management topics. A script from the facilitator guide of this presentation offers suggestions for describing this concept with examples of each instance, while acknowledging that having financial conversations can be a stressful experience, but help is available. And the facilitator guide also makes reference to the handout we see now on the right-hand side of the screen. This handout walks through the concepts of active listening to communicate care and concern for a partner or family member, and the use of I statements to avoid negative or accusatory language when sharing financial concerns or working together to develop financial goals. Consider sharing this handout, not only when facilitating the Money Matters presentation in slide 7, but also during any potential couples counseling sessions if financial concerns are addressed. Remember that handouts and slides are versatile tools that can be utilized inside and outside of presentations. MFLAG counselors are excellent sources of psychoeducation on so many topics. And one topic that MFLAG counselors can truly speak into is personal goal setting. Goal setting is particularly helpful when discussing financial concerns and family resource management, but can also be applied to many different situations. Slide 9 in this presentation defines the different letters in the acronym SMART to describe best practices for developing SMART goals, which, as you are likely already aware, describes specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound goals. And an excellent handout now available on the left-hand side of the screen for reference is also connected to this slide. It's available in the presentation as a handout. And remember, we can't say it enough, this slide and its narration in the facilitator guide is originally written for the financial conversation, but this information can be applied to meet the needs of any group or eligible individual in a presentation, a counseling session, or a consulting session. They're very versatile tools. Check out this handout and utilize it whenever you determine it's appropriate. On slide 11, we land on a video. Here's a screenshot of visible for our reference. And the video is from DVIDS, the Defense Visual Information Distribution Service. It's embedded inside the PowerPoint file. And this video has been approved to be shared by MFLAG counselors with assignment sites, especially for this presentation. But remember, this video can also be shared outside of a presentation. The video is hosted and narrated by a service member, which provides a unique perspective on budgeting and personal money management concepts. Since we just wrapped up a conversation about setting SMART goals on the slide previous, this video really ties the bow on the idea of personal financial goal setting, especially as related to basic ideas of family budgeting. But remember that if an MFLAG program participant is interested in seeking professional assistance with details about how to budget their paycheck and manage their bills, specific and personalized guidance should be sought from a referral like Military OneSource or a personal financial counselor on the installation. MFLAG counselors should always be prepared to provide this type of referral, since providing specific financial advice falls outside the scope of MFLAG support. But providing basic family life education about concepts of budgeting, general goal setting, and discussing concerns with family members certainly falls within our non-medical scope. Remember that videos like this one can be accessed by clicking on the Videos tab on the menu on the left-hand side of the library. And here on this slide, as we approach the end of the presentation, I want to take a moment and talk about these two slides we see at the same time, slides 13 and 14. They are so very important because they discuss referrals for financial concerns. As we all know, food insecurity is a concern that MFLAG counselors are trained to discuss with service members and families and refer them to appropriate resources whenever identified the need exists. This slide is very important because MFLAG counselors should discuss food insecurity or the potential need for referral to food insecurity resources with any service member or family member that reports financial concerns. In addition, slide 14 shares information about financial readiness resources. Because, of course, as we mentioned, financial advising is not within the MFLAG scope, MFLAG counselors won't be providing specific financial advice or guidance. Instead, MFLAG counselors identify a need for financial guidance and then refer service members and family members to these financial readiness resources, like those listed on the screen. Military OneSource, which provides individual financial advising and consultations. Personal financial counselor, for example, that may be available at an installation financial readiness program, or a financial readiness advisor at the Installations Family Assistance Center. The QR code at the bottom of that slide 14 also provides quick access to the Money Matters course available for service members and families to complete. So a variety of resources available there. And on that next slide, as we look at using this presentation as an MFLAG tool, another reminder here that handouts, activities, and even discussion from presentations can be added to many different types of MFLAG support, like those sprinkles can be added to most any dessert, right? This slide provides examples of how to apply this information. Of course, Money Matters and its activities can be shared during an actual presentation as an outreach and engagement activity. Handouts and other materials, including discussions and slides, can also be used to supplement a conversation during a consulting session, especially with key stakeholders or military leaders as you provide professional advice or guidance about supporting service members and families. And don't forget, the Money Matters resources can also be used to supplement a counseling session. For example, the Money Matters conversation handout about I statements that we saw a few moments ago could be supplement, for example, a couples counseling session, as we mentioned. And let's talk once more about Care For. And of course, Care For documentation is just so very important. Be sure to give yourself credit for the support that you provide in your assignment by accurately documenting activities. When sharing this Money Matters presentation or part of the presentation before an audience, document the interaction as an outreach and engagement activity and then select presentation. Document the total number of audience participants actively involved and engaged in the presentation. And then when the question asks what type of presentation did you provide, select financial from the options available. Remember that presentation materials, as we've said many times, can also be utilized in consulting sessions. When using any part of a presentation, an activity from the facilitator guide, a handout, or even a slide from the PowerPoint within a consulting session, be sure to answer yes to the question, was a presentation part of this consulting session? Then describe the type of presentation as financial. Please note, as we mentioned earlier, that Care For documentation of interactions depends on many different variables that may differ slightly from the recommendations shared here. Please consult directly with your regional supervisor if specific dynamics at your unique MFLAG assignment may result in documenting this presentation differently. And as you may have already noticed during your own exploration of the new OSD presentation library, Money Matters is not the only presentation now available which addresses financial concerns. We'd also like to take a moment and show you those presentations on the screen listed here that also address either financial concerns or relationship concerns, which we know can be closely linked to financial challenges. These presentations include financial fitness, exercise your benefits, building strong relationships, staying connected through change, and resilience during uncertainty. Remember that a list of all presentations, including the brief summaries mentioned on this slide, are available for MFLAG counselor reference anytime on the OSD presentation page of MagellanMFLAG.org. All right, as we prepare to wrap up our webinar with Q&A, before we jump into Q&A, we'd like to share some quick tips with you about presenting before an audience. In this month's webinar, we are going to focus on quick tips to preparing for presentation facilitation. And preparation is so very important when it comes to presenting at your assignment site. And key to preparation is communication. Clarify specific details about the presentation that you're planning to share and communicate with the POC to answer these questions and confirm details. What time does the presentation start? And how much time do I have? Being punctual is so very important for building rapport with key stakeholders and ensuring POC satisfaction. How many people do we anticipate might be in the audience, and who do we think might be in the audience? This information is important to helping you tailor the presentation to meet the needs of this audience by looking through the facilitator guide and carefully selecting the activities that you feel are best for this group based on your professional experience and expertise. What does the POC or stakeholder hope that the audience can gain from the presentation? What are their goals? What do they hope is results from this presentation? The answer to this question will also help you identify the best approaches to share the information and identify priorities for discussion topics. Now, preparation also goes hand in hand with practice. In fact, the MFLAC training team, no lie, practiced facilitating today's webinar multiple times, both individually and together, before we welcomed you all to join us today live. And this is something that we find is so very beneficial, and we highly recommend that you consider doing as an MFLAC counselor before sharing one of these presentations before an audience. Take time to identify which slides, which activities, and which handouts you'll be discussing during the allotted time frame that you will stick to, and tailor that presentation experience for that particular group on that particular day. And one last pearl of information we'd like to share with the group today before we enter in our second and wrap up Q&A time is about training resources available as you sharpen your public speaking skills. And the great news is that these resources that we highlight today, they're actually videos, are very easy to access and view. And this slide here shows us some screenshots from a playlist of videos, which are available to all MFLAC counselors on the Magellan Federal team, accessible on the MFLAC website. To access the videos, log into the website, magellanmflac.org, and click on Training and Development on the upper menu bar. Then click on Counselor Professional Development on the drop-down menu that appears. And on the screen on that page, there's an accordion menu. Click on Strengthen Your Public Speaking Skills to view this playlist. There are 4 videos currently available within the website page, and 3 are screenshotted here. These videos demonstrate best practices for public speaking from a diverse group of presenters. They demonstrate engaging an audience and using professional body language. If you haven't checked out these videos before, we highly recommend that you view them. Videos range anywhere from 3 minutes to 18 minutes in length. So hopefully you can watch a couple here and there and gain some extra tips and tricks. Now, we know you might be wondering, how am I going to record my time spent in today's webinar? In my Care For activity record for today, great question. We're so glad you asked. To record the time that you spent in today's webinar, add an activity record in Care For as admin and sup. Other, that's really important to select other, then researching new and existing resources. And a heads up, if you don't pick other, then you won't see researching new and existing resources, right? And then you might be wondering, how do I document this time in Deltek CostPoint? Great news is that it's very easy. Remember that for Deltek CostPoint, you'll be using the same regular charge code for labor that you normally use for MFLAC work for today's webinar. And we're about to enter Q&A. Get your typing fingers ready if you'd like to ask us a question. But before we enter Q&A, we want to let you know that you can mark your calendars now for our next get-together, our next Meet the Presentations webinar. It will be on December 12th at 11 a.m. Eastern. You don't have to memorize that date right now. If you happen to jot it down, that's great. We just want to give you the date. We'll be sending out webinar invitations soon, much like we did for today's webinar.